All right. From Travis, leader of men and children alike, master of all, he purveys, surveys, not purveys, although I may be master of all, I purvey as well. And some things he doesn't purvey. He who bathes, nay, frolics in leftist whales. A question, if I may. My wife and I are in our 30s, and we think Hollywood put out its best stuff during the 80s and 90s. Whenever you mention movies you love, you tend to cite the black and white classics. In your opinion, what did they have that later movies don't? Words. They had words. And that is what made them a little bit more adult. A culture that depends on language will be a thoughtful culture. A culture that depends on imagery will be a stupid culture. In the Middle Ages, you had church paintings that were what they called the gospel of the illiterate. That is conducive to, not to deep thought. It's language that takes us into deep thought. In the 30s and 40s, a movie script was 250 pages long, and a movie was 90 minutes to 2 hours. Now a movie is 90 minutes to 2 hours and the script is 110 pages long. That's because there's no dialogue in it. Hitchcock was the man who really realized what he did. And look, art will follow its own logic. What Hitchcock realized was that the movies were a visual art form, that sound had not in fact added that much to the way movies affect people. And so if you watch Vertigo, for instance, it's a sound movie with a half an hour of silence in it. There's a half an hour where nobody says a word in it. And that really transformed movies. So listen, the 80s and 90s, there were some great movies. Goodfellas was made then. Certainly, I guess The Godfather was in the 70s. That to me is the last actually great American film that is actually great. But still, there were some wonderful movies made in the 80s and 90s. What they didn't have was they didn't have the depth of thought and emotion and human interchange that movies had when the scripts were longer and when they were the writers were coming out of the theater. They were bringing theater to the movies. So I find those films a lot more adult and a lot more thoughtful. They're corny. They're old fashioned now. They may not speak into the life we live today. I understand that. They may have just become dated. But still, I thought that there was something there that has been lost. That said, I do believe there are great movies that were made in the 80s and 90s. Certainly a couple of great movies that were made in the 70s. And so it's just the language I miss. I just think art with language in it is smarter.